Hi, I'm Mike London, and I'm visiting with artists and arts leaders who work here in the Miami Valley. Culture Works supports a wide range of artists and arts organizations, and these interviews are our chance to visit with some of them and learn who's working right here in our community. So today, I'm speaking with Robb Willoughby. Good morning, Robb.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I really needed you because I needed another writer. Come on, I've had a wonderful range, but every now and then it's like, wait a minute, what am I missing? I need a playwright. So thank you. So I already gave it away what your art form is. Tell us about
Yes.
yourself as a playwright.
Well, okay, I'll give you the short version of it.
Okay.
I grew up here in the Miami Valley. I went to school out in California. I spent some time in New York, and now I find myself back here. I started writing when I was in California after school. I went to USC. I was working as an actor doing a bunch of commercials, and nobody would hire me. So I thought, well, I should write something for myself. And I wrote a few plays. Some people in New York saw one of the plays and brought me and the play to New York. I spent about 8 years there. And then my mom was getting older, so it was time to come home. And about 10 years ago, I came back home to be with her. And I found a wonderful group of talented artists to work with here.
Mhm.
I've learned that especially for playwrights, it's particularly easy because I can write anywhere. I don't have to be in New York City. I don't have to be in Chicago or Los Angeles. And there are wonderful, talented artists that I can work with here uh, that are just as satisfying and great of an experience.
Do you think of yourself as I mean, it's interesting when you work as an artist in different ways. Do you think of yourself first as an actor, or do you identify yourself and think of yourself as a writer first?
Well, I identify myself as a writer first. I think the acting really helped me informed my writing, and it helps me to write for actors, which
Yeah.
is what a playwright does. So I do believe first and foremost of myself as a playwright.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had this conversation with some folks a long time ago, and if we think back, especially before the time of so many available programs in playwriting now that exist at different universities. There really wasn't anything to speak of many years ago. So if you think back at many of the playwrights, they were actors first. They were the
It
ones
is
who knew the
true.
stage.
It is true. And I think it's a good position to start for a playwright because, like I said, you're writing for actors. So it's good to have that informed knowledge. I do think, like you said, there are lots of opportunities for playwrights, but there are very few opportunities nationwide for emerging and new playwrights to get their plays up on the boards. There are opportunities, there's community theater, and then there's professional theater. And in order for a playwright to get anything published, you need to have a professional production. So that's why it's important to link yourself with a professional company. And there are a few great ones here in Dayton. So I'm
So
lucky about that.
let me ask you this. You were talking about where things start. Where does the story start for you usually?
The inspiration
Yeah,
for a
where does it
story.
when you're starting on a piece, where does it come from?
Well, I can only speak from my experience, and it's any number of different places. A television commercial or a documentary that I've seen. One play I wrote started as a conversation between myself and somebody at work. So you just have to leave yourself open uh, for the inspiration. If you look too hard for it, I found that it's very difficult to find. So just leave yourself open and it finds its way to you.
How do you know which of those ideas is the one that you push forward with? And
Well,
you
I'll
know how
tell
stuff
you,
noodles in your brain and then you,
that's exactly it. You've got all these little seeds growing in your head for story ideas. And I find that the one that is closest to flowering is the one that takes precedence. And that sort of moves itself forward in your thinking. And that's how it comes. That's how I decide which one to go with.
so once you've moved past that point, what's the biggest challenge you've?
Well, I can only write I find that I can only write what is entertaining and interesting to me. So the story has to answer all the questions that I present, and I have to feel that at the end of the story, all the questions that might have come up while you're watching it, I've answered, given you the answers to, and it's a very satisfying feeling. Uh, that way I know, that's when I know that I'm done with a play, when all the answers are, when all the questions have been answered, and the story comes to a natural end.
Have you ever worked on a piece and then not been able to, you know what I mean, man?
Every day, yes. Yes, you can write yourself into a corner very easily at any given time, at any place in the story. But I do find that the more difficult it is to finish, the more satisfying it is when you do finish it. It's hard to put it away and not think about it when it's not done. It just sort of eats at you until until you finish it one way or another.
Yeah. So, uh, tell me about a show that you just had more fun than you imagined was possible.
Well, I did a show with the Human Race Theater Company here in Dayton. They did a reading of one of my plays. It was a few years ago. It was called Have You Ever Played Dayton? And it was about these aging Broadway divas who get tricked into opening a show in Dayton, Ohio. And the actors that they used at the race, I had known some of them, a few were new to me, but it's a comedy. And it was sort of my homage to all those backstage comedies that we see. And I have to tell you, when you work with talented artists, it's so easy for them to elevate the material. So I went in thinking it was one thing. And once we mounted the show, it was much funnier than I ever thought it was going to be. Not no fault of my own, but the people. When you have talented people and you invite them to collaborate with you, that's what it is. It's a collaboration. It's just my words, but they bring them to life, and it's a joy to do that and to see people invest in your words and bring these characters to life. And that one was particularly funny, and that was enjoyable.
When you work with a director, I'm curious. I've had conversations over the years with directors who just they love working with new work, and others that um, love working with new work, but they don't like working with writers.
Yes.
And so I had this conversation, I don't know, sometime last year with a director and about their experience, and they told me this from his perspective, certainly a horror story about what life was like trying to put this new piece up with the writer constantly there and nothing was ever quite right. What's Tell me about a relationship with a director that was just like really great, and have you had one that's been challenging?
Well, yeah,
You know
and
what I'm
I'll
talking
tell
about.
you, sure, it's like a love relationship in many ways. You need to find a partner that whose vision is similar to what you have, or something new and interesting. I think I'll give you two examples. One, I had a play that was going to be produced in Australia. So I went down there and I went to a few of the rehearsals, and I was asked to not come back to any of the rehearsals. Now, I don't think I was, interfering in the rehearsal, but I think my presence there, the director was maybe nervous, maybe always looking over his shoulder. So I didn't, and I saw the production, and it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. On the opposite end, we'd just done this reading, another one for the human race this past month. We did a virtual reading, and Saul Kaplan was the director, and I've known Saul. And when something works between a director and the writer, it's sort of unspoken. The director, at least Saul for me, he knows my work, and I don't have to explain it to him. So not only does he know it, he knows how to make it better. So that's the best relationship you can have with a director. But yeah, I've had good and bad. And it's, in a sense, when you write a play and give it to a theater company, it's out of your hands. So you have, some control, but not a lot. You just have to trust the director that you've been given is on your side. So I've been pretty lucky for the most part.
So let me ask you, when you think about those experiences in a reading, this last reading was very different, obviously. So we're recording this, and this is during during still in the pandemic, phase of 2020 that we're doing these interviews. Tell us about that experience, because it wasn't planned to be a virtual reading. Tell us about what happened.
They do a Monday night reading series at the Human Race, and it's sort of a tryout for plays that they might be thinking about producing. This was scheduled to be part of that Monday night series on April 27th. Well, that didn't happen, obviously, and they had pushed it off thinking maybe we could do it a little later on. And then, of course, things evolved, and Kevin was very determined to do this. I mean, it would have been very easy for them to just postpone it and say, we can't do it this year. But they were very determined to keep the human race a vital part of this community, even during this time. So we Zoomed rehearsals, which was like a bad SNL skit to begin with, I must admit. And I had spoke to Kevin, and we were both concerned that we didn't want people to sit and watch, the opening of the Brady Bunch for 2 hours. That would have been very challenging. And so we had this wonderful director, Jason Sheldon, who worked with the recording that we made. We did record it all together, just like a performance on Zoom. He took that recording and edited it, so it made it much more watchable. It was this weird hybrid between a film and the theater, because you have the technical stuff, the close-ups of a film, and then because we did it as a performance, you have the immediacy of the theater. So it was this odd hybrid, which I think, at least for the time being, is where we're headed. And while, the theater is very special because the experience itself, the performers, the audience, all in the same room, it only happens once. That is the experience of theater. And to watch it on the screen, on our computers at home, it loses that intimacy. But they did a really good job, and I have to give it to the actors. Their performances were terrific, and it couldn't have been easy because, comedy is not easy to begin with. But they Saul really made a point to work hard and pull it off to make it an interesting and fun show to watch. I was really pleased how it turned out.
Yeah. I've talked to a number of people actually who got a real big kick out of it, and
Oh, good.
Yeah, they didn't. And here's the thing that was interesting that I heard people going, I really didn't know what to expect. Not because
Yeah,
of the play, they didn't know what to expect from that experience. That
I know.
Yeah, they didn't know either, and they were like, "I want to see this show now," kind of thing. And you've done something right when you can get an audience to go, "Oh, I want to go." In other words, I want to go again. I want to see the story again. I want to see it live. So
I heard
yeah, you guys must have nailed something there.
we did. They did, and through no fault of my own, I have to admit. But Jason did a really good job with the editing, and like I said, the performers were gave such great performances, even though they were just performing into their screens.
Yeah,
They gave
absolutely.
it was a good show. So I'm excited to see it on stage as well. It was scheduled to be performed at a theater in St. Louis this summer, a place called the First Run Theater. But of course, things have been postponed and put off. So we're just standing by to see what happens with that.
Tell me, what do you think? What do you think's going to happen with all of this? I've asked so many people,
Oh
and I've
no.
heard so many different things.
I don't know exactly. I'm hoping, obviously that we can get through this and get back to going to see theater. I'm not sure how it's going to evolve.
So,
All the festivals and competitions for playwrights have been put on hold this whole year,
mhm.
and most theaters have ceased their seasons so far, and they've announced them, but who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. What are you working on right now?
I just finished. The good thing about this staying at home is that it forces you to write, and I
Or do a
wrote,
lot of
I,
cleaning?
yes, well, that was first. Anything to keep you from actually doing what you need to do in writing. There's a book called The Lazy Tour of Two Idle Apprentices. And it's an very old short story by Charles Dickens. I have two friends who are actresses in Florence, Italy, and they do theater for students who are learning to speak English. So they needed a play that was just over an hour that two people could do, and it had to be published in English, so it had to be in the public domain. So I found this obscure Charles Dickens short story, which is basically about these two guys who go on a trip to prove who is the laziest amongst the two of them. And I turned it into this two-person show. And they started rehearsals in Italy, I guess, last week, the two of them. But they're much the same as we are. Things are up in the air for them as well. So that was the latest thing. That's the latest play I did.
Yeah. Have you got something else you're noodling on?
Oh yes, there are, three or four seeds trying to bloom in my head right now. But once I write a play, I have to take a little break and just clear things out for a moment before the next idea will push its way forward, and I'll take it.
So, have you ever worked in the theater is very much, as you said before, a collaboration. Have you ever, though, actually collaborated on the writing of a new work?
I One of the first plays I did was called Eight Ball. And I wrote it with a friend of mine in Los Angeles, and we performed it together. But other than that, I'm not necessarily I haven't collaborated with anyone writing. Now I've written things for particular actors,
Mhm.
so in that way I've collaborated. But writing is sort of a solitary thing for me. Um, I'm not opposed to writing with somebody, but it just hasn't happened yet.
This is um, this is a wonderful community to be able to work in. I'm just curious for you, and as a playwright. I mean, because I see in the work that I do, I see all kinds of arts. I see painters and singers and musicians. I see an incredible wealth, but I don't know sometimes if I'm like, in a unique situation. What's it like for you to work in this community?
Well, I find that I've never been more supported artistically. People are, volunteer their talent and their time to put something together. And it's not just for the money at this point. Where we are right now, it's difficult to make a living just off the arts. But that makes it all the more sweeter because the people are involved because they want to be. And when you have talented people who are willing to support your efforts, uh, it's very satisfying. It's very validating. And like I said before, you could go to New York, you could go to Chicago, but on any given night, there are performances and gallery openings, all sorts of talented artists right here that you can support and be part of. And they're just as talented, and the performance levels are just as high as any professionals in New York or Chicago. So I have a very unique position where I have friends who happen to be very talented actors, and I can call on at any given point, and will do a play reading for me around my kitchen table for just pizza. So to have your play, even though it might work in your head, you need to hear it out loud. And to have the opportunity to have these talented actors who are willing to help me with that at any given moment is really a luxury for a playwright. So I'm very lucky in that aspect.
Whenever you hear your work read out loud, have you ever heard something that you didn't expect that helped crystallize what worked or didn't work?
Oh, yes. Well, that's constantly the case because when I write it, of course, I'm acting it all in my head. And you give it to a talented actor who can give you a choice or an option that you never thought of that makes it even better. That's the whole point of collaboration. You trust, you give your words to an actor to bring to life, and they make it better than what's on the page. You can't ask for anything better than that.
Have you ever had that time where you were writing a comedy and in the reading it came out a drama, or the opposite?
Well, yeah, because there are things that I think are laugh lines that aren't, and things that you don't think necessarily funny that people find hysterical. So it's difficult to judge what's really going to get a laugh and not. But a good actors can get you two laughs from one joke. So uh, it's good to have the feedback from the actors as well. My friends aren't shy about telling me when things don't work, and you
Really?
need that. Yeah, you need that. So I appreciate that, and I respect their opinions. So that's helpful.
So this has had to have happened to you. So there are writers in the community, and there are other playwrights that you meet in the theater, or there are those people who want to write. So what are three pieces of advice that you would give somebody who was new, regardless of whether they were a young playwright or not? What are three pieces of advice that you'd give somebody who wanted to start as a playwright?
All right. Well, three things. The first one is, everyone has a terrific idea for a play. The problem is nobody writes it down. So the first advice is to write the play. Type out and write the play. That's the most important. Secondly, there are any number of opportunities, not just where I am, locally, geographically, but all across the nation. There are different reference books. One's the Dramatist Source Book. The Dramatists Guild also has a reference book. So you need to send your stuff out. You've got it written. Now you need somebody to read it. Now, getting somebody to read something is not easy. It's not like an actor where they can look at your headshot and say yes or no. They actually have to take time and read it. So it's a lot to give somebody a play from a stranger they've never heard of and ask them to read, an 80-page play. But you've got to put it out there, and you've got to send it out, and just be consistent. Thirdly is finish the play. So many people start their stories and have wonderful beginnings, and then they stop. You've got to finish the story. And I find that once you finish the story, the fact that you finished it is enough inspiration for you to send it out. That's what gets you excited, finishing the story. So write the story, finish it, and send it out.
Good advice. Just get it out there, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Robb, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this is an opportunity for all of you that might be viewing this to get to know some of the artists who live and work right here in the Miami Valley. Culture Works, as I said before, supports a wide range. And there's a place for you in supporting Culture Works. Right now is a difficult time. As Robb said, it's hard to tell when things are going to start back for some arts organizations. We're finding other ways. Artists are working online, but to create those lab experiences again, there are organizations and artists that are going to continue to need support, and they're going to need your support. So whether you're with the campaign here in Montgomery County or one of the other campaigns for Culture Works, I hope you go to the website, cultureworks.org. When you want to know more information about Culture Works, cultureworks.org is, in fact, the website. You can learn about becoming a Passport member and all of the other ways that you can possibly support. Do that, find it. You'll find, I have found for my family that I can afford to do things that I couldn't afford to do because I am a Passport member. I love the buy one, get one free on the tickets. So for everybody out there, this is a message for you to support Culture Works. Robb, thank you. Maybe we could do this again and we don't have to have the online in between us here.
Absolutely. Let's hope so, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.